Welcome to the seventh episode of Artist Trauma. I forgot the.
Artist trauma. I'm sorry. I thought that you left a space
There
for.
we go. No. I just flat out forgot. I remember the number, but I forgot the show. Even though I have no other shows. Okay, this week we did William Gass. We did Order of Insects and the Heart of the Country. This was Chris's pick, and well, this will be interesting. Um,
Okay, so um, I thought for the first time the pairing of stories we did. I thought the Order of Insects was cute. It was fine. It was good, but the formal and just language in the heart of the country just almost made me forget the insect story, and I was blown away by in the heart of the country.
Well, I'll say something similar about it. Of Heart of the Orient Sex. Like, okay, I this is there's good writing there. I don't quite know what to make of it, but fine. Um, Heart of the Country. Like, there's also good writing there, but I also fucking hated it.
Oh, you hate it? Oh, it's one of my
Like,
favorite things we've done.
I was disgusted by it. I was over like almost every level. I just thought, what a pretentious ass. Like there are good lines in it. There are good lines, but I also feel like it was written by a pedophile. It was so insincere. So this will be fun for us to like figure this out. You want to start with Order of Insects?
Sure.
Yeah. So I basically, I mean, I always say like I like a lot of the things that are in there. Like I like a lot of the individual lines. Like, oh, there's these bugs crawling around, and it's like the way like the cat kills them, and it's described as it's like causing chaos on the insides while leaving the skeleton, the exoskeleton of the of it intact. It's like, okay, that's kind of a nice little image. Um, but oh Jesus, I just didn't really feel the point of the story. I didn't really know what glimmer this was supposed to be into. It's like, okay, a housewife who likes bugs, like, has this odd predilection for them that begins with disgust and then turns into her own little museum of them. Like, okay, but I don't believe in the housewife as a character. She's just this sort of mist of a narrator. I don't. She doesn't hold together exactly. So I don't really know the point. What did you make of the story?
Okay, so first of all, I just have to throw out my favorite little joke, which was on page 164, where she just like gets really like over deep into this bug world, and then she just goes, I could look it up, I guess, but it's no study for a woman. Dot 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 bugs. And it was like, I don't know, I just
Well,
felt it was perfect because it sort of it wasn't breaking the fourth wall, but it was sort of like this self awareness in the writing of the main character of she knows that she's looking too deep into this in a certain sense.
well, when you say too deep into this, do you think it's for societal reasons? As in, she's just thinking like, well, bugs aren't girly things, and I'm a girl, so I shouldn't be reading this or looking into this. Like, is that the reason, or is this like a metafictional thing, or what?
I mean, she says it's, no study for a woman, and like that binary pops up a couple times between woman and man and appropriate action, but I thought it was just simpler. I thought it was more she is bored, and the thing that's filling the boredom is the bugs, and therefore there's still a distance there where she realizes that there's not a grand motive for looking at the bugs. The dot 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 bugs just for me gives that self-reflective, um almost like she knows she's not losing her sanity. It's a
Oh,
articulation point for me.
well, I don't really know about that. I'm not disagreeing because I don't really have a firm opinion about what's going on in this story. My tentative reading though is it's like no, she's really fascinated by it. Like she has a collection of it. She describes it with like a sexual pleasure almost. I mean, they're like sort of a I almost want to say like a quasi sex scene where it's like, oh, I put my finger out and it grabs it grabbed the long part of the fingernail. I just like, I don't know, at least the way that Gas writes, I have that feeling that that's
Mm.
the subtext. Um, and he's such a
Gats writes like like Proust with like penises. I'm sorry, there's a weird sexual thing always in everything we've in both stories and in some of the other ones as well. That is well, it is what it is. I mean, it's very jarring, but then at the same time, it fits, I guess.
Yeah, I'm happy with sexuality and even like bizarre sexuality in a book. Like I'm very much on board with Michelle Welbeck's Serotonin, which holy fuck. I mean the book has like bestiality and group sex and child abuse and all this stuff. It's great.
Yeah.
Um, and it works because it portrays this world of like ugliness and filth, of like decadent European 21st century man.
Yeah.
Which I'm very, like, okay, like, good job, Michelle Welbeck. Like, it's disgusting and it has a point. I don't really see the point exactly with Gas. It just feels more like, let me ooze into this. Like he refers to himself as that sort of way. I don't. I find it uncomfortable, the sexuality in the stories, in a way I don't find it uncomfortable with Welbeck or Nabokov. Um, just it's well, I guess we'll talk about that more when we get to the second
Yeah.
story.
I'm kind of on the side of thinking it works because I think it's using sex in a way first I haven't seen before. And I went, "Oh, that's different." So there was at first just a different use of sexuality than what I was used to, and I found that generally good. But I also do wonder, is this just an evocative character study, or is there real dramatic motion that happens in this book that comes to a head?
Um, it feels well. Let's put a.
Again, I actually I like character studies. You know,
Yeah,
they're
no,
great,
no,
and this
I'm
is
happy with
joining a
characters.
character study. But
I'm yeah.
I'm with you. Is there something? Because he writes in a way. I mean, just for the audience, Gas writes in a way where there's a lot of loose ends. There's a lot going on, and then there's certain points where you go, okay, that's a little bit writing out. I would say,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
out
it's
in a different way.
very, yeah, like the way he writes is very directionless and oozes. Yeah, yeah, that oozes because he does describe himself in the second story as oozing. It's like I like to pull myself together, as they say, and that's not even like the way he thinks about issues, is pulling himself together. He just oozes like his cat. And like the writing style is that way. It's like very sharp and not telegrammatic at sometimes, but it's also just like, well, we just changed subjects fundamentally, and who are you talking to, Gas? And that's not what we started talking about in this paragraph. Like, there's and
Mm-hmm.
like one of them, like, okay, I don't think there's like he's just like talking about one of the bugs, like just to give a flavor of the text. And it's like two prongs extended like daggers from the rear. I suppose I'll never know their function. That kind of knowledge doesn't take my interest. At first, I had to screw my eyes down as I considered it now. The whole change, the recent alteration to my life, was the consequence of finally coming near to something. It was a self mortifying act, I recall, a penalty I laid upon myself for the evil words I shouted at my children in the middle of the night. I felt instinctively the insects were infectious and the disease, so when I knelt, I had a handkerchief over the lower half of my face, saw only horror, turned sick, making eyes. Yet the worst of angers held me through the day, vague, searching, guilty, and ashamed. What? I can't really follow that on a certain. Like it starts off like, okay, this part of the anatomy. Then looking closer at it because she was mortifying herself because she said something in the middle of the night about her children. Like what? Why would you mortify yourself over that exact? And that's not established that she's gets upset at her children. and then it like looking more, and then mentioning how the insects are diseased. Like I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's
Hard to
oozy.
follow. It's
Yeah.
oozy, and it also is the stream of consciousness of a person who's not telling you. So I think this is honest at point stream of consciousness and the way mind works, my mind works, because when I'm referring to things that are happening, I'm not also then reminding myself and summarizing for myself. Like if I
No,
did something.
yeah, like I'm on board with stream of consciousness. Like, you and I read Sound the Fury before this group. And I read As I Lay Dying, and a lot of other, like A Catcher in the Rye, and a lot of other things. And like I like the stream of consciousness style. I think it's very effective. And Joyce. I'm even like on board with like it's very dense and you don't know what they're talking about for a while. This is like, okay, get through the whole story. I still don't know the structure of this thing. Let's see. What is it exactly that I'm finding repellent about this? Um, and there's a distinction between like, is it aesthetically bad, or is it just I don't like him? I don't like his attitude towards things. So there's this whole mess of different aspects. Um,
One thing that was a linchpin sentence that I think is part of the essence of the work is we have different books. I can't give you page numbers.
yeah,
Uh, it isn't possible to feel disgust towards such an order. Nevertheless, I reminded myself, a roach, and you a woman, I no longer own my own imagination. I think the sentence "I no longer own my own imagination" is sort of the skeleton key for me of reading the story, because okay, so metaphorically, insects
that's a
are
good one.
invaders
Yeah,
of the house. Yeah, insects are the invaders of the house, and you have to deal with them colonizing the space. It's a weird phrasing, but sure, okay. um,
it's a price. I like it.
the metaphor for me, it maps this way: insects to house, and the house is her own mind. So it's a multi-layered metaphor. So like the insects are invading the house as she feels other thoughts are invading her own mind, and she comes to a confrontation with the insects and sort of, it's like almost the way that she deals with them is to embrace the fascination, was
Yeah,
my.
yeah. One thing I'll say is I like the idea of this story. Like, I like that kind of setup of, oh, we have this very conventional housewife who is suddenly like overcome with fascination bordering on sexual with um, insects, which is sort of a great sort of symbol or representative of a repulsive other, which does
Yeah.
not belong as her identity. My problem, I guess, is, and that's wonderful. That's great. My only
Yeah.
problem here is just sort of with the execution of I don't believe in her as a housewife. I don't have the sense of her conventionality and normality, or I don't know, like an uncanny um aspect to her like beforehand. Like, this is not like the Stepford wife going about her daily business and can't take her eyes off these beetles. Um I'm not getting that. There's a few little bits which are like, okay, a touch here, a touch there for her middle class life, but not that much. I found.
Do you feel that there's a conflict here? Not, this is a weird conflict. Do you think that gas is too present? Like do you get, I get gas very clearly.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you
like
know,
that's
as a writer, I
yeah,
get like
that's the
his sense
thing.
of life. I think he's strong in that regard. Like I already am like, okay, I have a category like gas in my mind from them.
Yes, Gas has a very distinctive voice.
Do you think that interferes with the ability to characterize though?
Yeah, as in, well, that interferes significantly here. Of No, this is a weird housewife, the someone who'd write like this, and not like one who's like after the fact. Like there's no like the way a housewife would write would either be a little more is conventionally ordered, like it wouldn't be so just that murk that I just read. Exactly. It would it's hard for me to put my finger on it, but it's just like I don't believe in this character. It really is like that's just gas. That's just gassing all over the place. Um
So a more successful version of this story would have been more of a disconnect tone wise between her and the story in the heart of the country. Like
yeah,
tone
like that was
from.
that was the thing is that like when I first
Mhm.
was reading this, I was actually thinking because this is the first story I read, it was like, oh well, I guess one thing Gass did a well good job on is capturing a female voice. Like it sounded very feminine in a sense, and then you read Heart, you know, Heart of the Country. It's like, oh no, that's just Gas. He just sounds like a woman. He just sounds very prissy.
So does he sound like Colette? Oh, you haven't read Colette
I
yet.
haven't read Colette, but
You
I,
haven't read Colette there.
I haven't. The only, I mean, he sounds a little bit like Virginia Woolf. If Virginia Woolf was less authentic and sincere, frankly, because I really just.
That's the point that I guess I don't get any insincerity.
Well, we'll get into it because I haven't.
In this story, did you have insincerity?
I didn't really feel there was anything insincere exactly, except just like okay, the character didn't come off very well, and I of like this transition. Like there's no inner conflict in a sense in this story. Like that's one thing is I there was no sense of I am this one way and I found myself falling into this other thing. I didn't get any of that. It's like no, it just sort of happened, and there's no consequences. There's no build up. I mean, I'm okay if it's chaotically presented. Like I don't know,
Hmm.
like Joyce Carol Oates is a writer who's really able to like just screw with time in a significant way, but she's and like so I'm okay with it being non-linear, but it's like no, it's not non-linear, it's soup. It's ooze. We get one instant that's sort of done as almost in the corner of your eye of like, oh, like putting your finger out for the beetle. But that was really it.
So there is. I get the sense that Gas. I texted you this, and I was like really careful with my word choice. I think that Gas is aware, and in a way that like is a little odd. So like I wonder if this conflict that we're having about her character is the conflict she's having. Like that is just literally the conflict is one of identity. Because look at how many times she reminds herself of her own identity. I am the wife of the house. And then even the ending of the story, how can I think of such ludicrous things, beauty and peace, the dark soul of the world? For I am the wife of the house, concerned for the rug, tidy and punctual, surrounded by blocks. I actually really like that last line.
I mean,
Um,
the thing is that would be good sort of narration almost. I find it pretentious in a certain way, but it's evocative, and but the problem is I don't believe in that voice at all as the voice of a wife of like, oh yeah, a conventional housewife who has these responsibilities. Like, no, like that's completely foreign to this narrator. Like, no, she doesn't have to like do normal shits and like keep a and like have get the kids up in the morning and have make sure they get their shoes on for school. Like I do not get that sense at all that this is the sort of person who would do that. So it always feels
oh,
to me like it just sort of
I did.
sh- bursts out, or like it's what's the word for like jarring. It's like no, you don't. No, I don't believe you do. I don't believe you are the woman of the house. I really don't.
Oh, okay. I do, and I have some other evidence. So she identifies. Okay, so sorry. I think the fundamental metaphor is slightly different going through this. she's the insect of the house. Sorry, look right here. I no longer, it was like literally the next line
Yeah.
after I stopped reading before. I reminded myself a roach and you a woman. I no longer own my own imagination. I suppose they came up the drains or out of the registers. It may have been the rug they wanted. Crickets, too, I understand, will feed on wool. I used to rest by my husband. And then very formally, with the double ellipses, stiffly, waiting for the silence to settle, his sleep to come. And the imagery further on, like never alive, they came from punctures. She's sort of switching between talking about her own body as being as having certain insect like characteristics with her own character. So I think that the whole point of the insects is her own anxiety.
But the anxiety is never really dramatized or characterized in her. It's like, okay, it just sort of mentions one time she had evil tempered words. I shouted at my children in the middle of the night. It's like, okay, that is a thing, but we never ever get an actual interact. We don't have any idea of what her relationship with her children is or her relationship with her husband. Like there's a few mentions of like what it's like to lie with him in bed when he's asleep, but there's nothing more. I think I could swear there's like one other thing where maybe it's like yeah, I think it's the ordinary fears of daily life, healthy fears, womanly, wifely, motherly ones. The children may point at that wretch with the hunch and speak in a voice he will hear. The cat has fleas again. They will go on the sofa. One's face looks smeared. It's out of the heat. Is the burner on etc. There's a number of others. Like okay, like that is some characterization. Like those are actual thoughts, and I think like yeah, that's fine. Um, but I'm not. It's just sort of like a paragraph's worth of characterization in that direction. I don't get. It feels very perfunctory, the amount of efforts put into describing her as a housewife. Um, so I'm not. I just don't believe in
Mm.
that.
Yeah,
Are you seeing where I'm coming from here?
yeah, I see where you're coming from. We just don't like our values in reading fiction here don't align. So it always helps me because like I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that might be viewed as a problem. I don't like I guess like this is such a weird thing to say, but I don't really read fiction needing like a character. I read every time we do these ones, you bring up the characterization and I go, "Oh, okay, yeah." Because I don't really I guess it's not really part of my values as much when I read fiction. Like when I read fiction like this, what I get is a intense sense of life through the language and through the word choice and through the relational aspects of the objects in the house. And it's all selected very carefully.
I think it
And I also get the character and the way the words tumble, like which thought does go to which other thought is characterization for me.
okay. Well, here's like a here's at least an important contrast for us as we read Antonio de Benedetto's Zama.
Yeah.
Now, Zama, the major appeal of that book, I mean, the narrator is very appealing, who's the central character in a sense, but it's the style. It's just that very sort of intense, isolated, De Chirico-esque presentation that he has.
And the sudden um I can't believe this is such a weird, almost inhuman way to describe it, but I don't know, just like the great sentence length variation, the violence and the
Yeah, like
event, sudden violence.
yeah, there's just
Yeah,
such an incredible rhythm to his language, and like when it conveys this sense of isolation and heat and
yeah,
purposelessness, almost haphazard quality of existence so well. Like I can't like whenever I mention De Benedetto, even just to myself, like I have this image of like heat. Like it's just sort of a hot day in this sort of wasteland and like you see the vibration of it. But that's a book where like, okay, I'm on board. I'm very much on board. But with just like the way just things come up, like there's not plot, there's not a whole lot of characterization besides of the narrator. Here, I'm just trying to think of how this is different. I guess,
Well, it's an ooze. I mean, the ooze.
yeah,
ben,
that is,
Benedetto is a scissors.
yeah,
That's a little weird of a metaphor, but when we read Benedetto, it's sharp edges.
yeah,
And here, where the sharp edges, I think there are sharp edges in gas,
yeah, but
but
it's
they're sharp edges that are like subjectively found in like me reading it and going, oh, that was a weird observation. I think in the flow of the text, it's still kind of ooze.
I mean, this might just be me more of a me. We'll get into in the heart of the country, which is a bit different, but in this sense. But
Mhm.
I actually do find that me personally, I don't like an oozing style. I find I respect Virginia Woolf. I respect John Janae. I partially respect Juna Barnes, but that particular kind of oozing
Mhm.
quality they have, that sort of way subjects get confounded and it's in the sort of world of abstractions which aren't concretized very clearly. I find that to be repellent in a deep way, even when I respect it.
You're
Um,
you're gonna personally want more of the hard. Okay, like you remember when I was talking about Anna Seghers, and I was like, she's a writer of hard edges, and I really liked that in her because I liked these hard edges. I mean, hard edges may not really work as a metaphor there, but it does sound like you can
well,
contrast the Seghers versus this.
there's yeah. Cigars has very good detailing.
Like,
It's very concrete facts. You know what's going on, and it's very bare emotionally. Like it doesn't quite give you a judgment. It's just, yeah, this is what happened. So I like, but how about we just move properly into in the heart of the country because I this is exactly.
this
Um,
this is the big statement. I think fictionally, I think Order of Insects is a it's a work, but I think in the heart of the country is more of a
yeah, and I have
it
much more.
took longer to write. I'll say it that way.
Yeah, and I have many more. I have many more like places I wrote down, and I just was like, "This is horrible. I hate this line." Um,
So before um I am thinking about writing paper to be published on this, hopefully, because I have a crossover formally from this book into music, which is so I mapped out the repetition of each chapter, and because I was like, I think there's a logic to the repetition of the chapters. Like I think there's a structure there with certain rules. I got that like okay, there's a like a and
yeah,
what I
I could detect something like that. I don't think it's that hard and fast, but I'd say there's something there.
okay, so I found a billion interesting things, but only one that I want to share because um, this type of analysis is much more fun to read than talk about because it's kind of dry.
But I just want to say for the audience, in the heart of the country is more or less just a description of what the Midwest is like from the perspective of gas.
Oh my god, and there are so many moments where I was just like, yeah, I lived that.
Yeah, so
I lived
it's
that.
that's really
It was so authentically correct and honest about it. I loved it. Okay, but it was just for me captured it the best I've ever read of living there in just that honest, just this deep way.
yeah,
Okay. All right. So here's the but here's the weird structure. Um, so you have 36 chapters, and each or whatever sections, named sections. You have
no,
six.
we're talking about it looks like that.
Yeah, they look like that. The repetition begins after the sixth one. So you have, a place, whether, my house, a person, where's the house, the church, my house. So the first point of repetition, or where we return to, comes after six. So in the slight abstracting of the form, you can think of six sections of six, but that's not really readable. That's not my experience of it. But this is the cool point. All of them repeat several times, usually three and at the most four. Or return four times. Um, the 33rd section is called the first person, which is the fourth time that comes back. This is why I think he's aware and why I'm like, oh, this guy's kind of weird. So that was the fourth time that happened. Then he has household apples, which is one of the few that never repeats and it only happens once. So you go four, one. Then you have the church, which this is only the second time it comes back. So you go four, one, two, and then it ends with business, which is the third time it came back. Three. So you have one that's a baptismal thing, only happens one time, followed by a thing where it's only the second time, and it ends with a thing that's only the third time, which is just means that to me that he planned out the repetitions.
Okay.
And I even reread the ending and went, yeah, it's because he ends by re-immersing you into he gives you a baptismal one that only happens once, and then through gradual addition of repetitions brings you back into the fold. So
Okay. Yeah, I had a
you get a little point. There we go.
I had a feeling about that. Well, it's just sort of like it starts off like, okay, here's the Midwest. Here's what and it's not particularly happy. It's rather unhappy, and then it gets more into like, okay, well, the city also sucks, and a few positive things, and then it sort of ends on like, okay, yeah, this is back in the Midwest. Let's just. How about you start off with just, is there a line or quote here that you find particularly evocative?
Yeah. So um this is one of the few stories we've read where I think it actually is phenomenologically interesting. And for the people, it just means the study of the first person experience of the world. In particular, this is the first story we've read that is deeply Heideggerian. The fundamental point is not that you're looking at objects, but that objects disclose themselves to you. And I'll just give you a quote to prove my point. I climbed high stumps, 10 tall, remain, and I climb these like a boy to watch the country sail away from me. So the agency is not on the person watching in a certain sense. It's shifted to the movements around. So the country has agency itself and is sailing away. And I've just had that experience. I've grown up in the Midwest where I've sat literally on stumps and watched the wind blow, and it feels as if not only are you not in the center of where things are at, things are actively as you sit moving farther away from you, and you're becoming more isolated in the
Yeah,
country.
like that. That's a nice line. That's a nice
Yeah, I
line.
thought it was.
I wouldn't call that Heideggerian exactly. I mean, other, like Faulkner writes that way, rather regularly.
Yeah, I guess there's just a lot in here that is very deep, I guess, in terms of, for me, human experience. I even like the opening. So I have sailed the seas to come dot 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 to be a small town fastened to a field in Indiana.
It's a good, but I like that fasten to a field.
Yeah, I like the fastened to a field, and I also like how, again, a lot of this removes sort of causation. It's almost just like things are stuck places. um, the town is outstandingly neat and shady, and always puts its best side to the highway. I just really like that line too.
That's funny. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
line.
I really love describing the town as sort of like it's a little bit personified, of course, but it also is like it's more than that. It's like it's so oh yeah, that is how towns are made. They're fastened to the highway. It's not it's just a very accurate description in a certain
Yeah, yeah.
sense.
I think there's good writing there. I think it's
Yeah.
clever. Um, I just it's just there's things that in this which repel me. Like there are just lines that are like, okay, what's wrong with you? Like at the end of My House, it says, um, "It's true there are moments, foolish moments, ecstasy on a tree stump. When I'm all but gone, scattered, I like to think like seed. For I'm the sort now in the foolish position of having love left over which I like to lose. What good is it now to me, candy over ungiven after Halloween?" I fucking hate that line for several reasons. Um,
Oh, I wrote, I starred that. That was one of my, I really liked that part.
yeah, I hate it because, well, one thing, okay, one of the sense of life reason, not an aesthetic reason, if I just the way it's like foolish moments, ecstasy on a tree stump. I don't like that kind of, oh, I'm foolish, I'm oozing. I don't like that kind of attitude. Um, when I'm all, but like what really is repellent to me is I'm in the fool's position of having love left over, which I like to lose. And it's like, okay, that's also just the way he talks about love makes me actively uncomfortable. Um, like I just feel it's insincere in a deep way. I see that he's good at describing certain things in this world, but I really it just when he says it, it sounds wet. Like his voice is moaning a bit. Like this is the way like a preacher talks to you about love. Um, and it just that's why I really I just get the feeling of reading a pedophile when I read this stuff. And the last line of "What good is it to me now, candy ungiven after Halloween?" And it's like, okay, I see the analogy here, I see the metaphor, but it just feels so tasteless. It's like it just feels like such a petty thing of like candy ungiven after Halloween versus like I don't know the love you have for the world. It's these are not commensurate features unless you feel like or unless like you're just that kind of petty person. It just rings wrong to me so deeply. Um, I
I
mean,
think it's another moment of Gas self-reflecting on his own and bringing it out of the deepity and into the real world. Like you're like dot 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 bugs. I think the exact same structure is happening here. He's going, he's getting into it too much. He's laying it on thick, and then the pedestrian image just brings it back to a level of him not taking himself too. It's almost like the narrator telling himself not to take himself so seriously. To me, I
and
thought it was pretty
I,
effective.
I find that let's see, I'm trying to think of anything that's similar to that, but is that sort of thing really I find offensive? Of no, you're a fucking writer. Like you're asking me to spend time reading this. You better be like doing a good job, you fuck. You know, like you better actually like have gotten yourself clear here. Like I mean there are I'm trying to think of any
It's so weird that you're saying that because I think it's perfect. Absolutely. Like when I was reading it, I was like, that was the exact because like have you ever had the experience of like you're too deep in something and so it was just it's a pulls you out of it in a way that was just really well done.
I mean I'm okay with the idea of like okay, I got too excited and interested in this one thing. I got carried away. I'm okay with a digressive style. In a sense because and maybe there's a little bit of a sense of the writer apologizing a bit, but he's not really apologizing. Here it's more just feels like oh I'm just oozing all over the place and I'm not thinking too clearly, and I know he's putting craft into it, like you know you mentioned the opening lines and it's like there's craft there, but it also just feels sloppy on some fun, especially that fucking metaphor. I mean,
Don't like the candy on Halloween.
any ungiven after Halloween, like that'd be sort of a cute comparison for something more petty almost. Like oh I had you know like almost like humorously, like I imagine like like a Catholic priest like who makes the stuff that you give in communion, the wafers, and it's like oh he had too many like candy ungiven at Halloween. Like that's funny. because like you think, oh yeah, it's the body of Christ, and you're comparing it to candy and given on Halloween. Isn't that funny? Like it's belittling. But here it's like, no, no, like this is, you shouldn't compare it to that, this supposed love you have for the world. Um, I mean,
I mean,
there,
that's just kind of what he's. I guess I can't make like a well. I guess what I would say to that, because I mean, it's like a completely different. I had a completely different experience. Is that the image only works because it is something that he's taking to be supposedly deep and realizing in a different register it's not. Like it only if it was something less quote unquote important, then it wouldn't work at all to me.
well, that's, let's see, okay, well, like let's see, is there more to it? Of like the point is, yeah, he's just on the stump and he's just describing. I mean, it was important to you. It was important to you what he was describing on this stump of like he goes up there, he sees the world receding him like that. It was actually insignificant to you. Um, um, I mean, this sort of description of like like the Midwest as being barren. Like this. Let's see. At dusk, starlings dart in the single tree, a larch which stands in the middle. When the sky moves, fields move under it. I feel on my perch that I've lost my years. It's as though I were living at last in my eyes, as I have always dreamed of doing, and I think then I know why I've come here to see, and so to go out against new things. Oh God, how easy, like air in a breeze. Like I mean, it's like that's sort of like I feel like that's meant to be like authentic. Like, yeah, like I want to go out and do these things, and I'm observing these things about nature, and then he just belittles it that way, and it's like, and he belittles it with this stupid fucking metaphor. It's like this feels tasteless. I mean, there's other kinds of lines in here, like
But
actually,
isn't that I know this is like not a very nice way to talk about it, but isn't that like obviously the point though? Like he okay, so here's my reading of the same text. He goes out into he returns. I mean, he arrives at Indiana. We don't know why, but he arrives, which clearly seems to be back to a place from his childhood. He arrives back, my house. Clearly, there's a sort of archetypal memory of the Midwest that he's revisiting in this story. Like he's been here before. It is what I get. Like I don't get that this is like the first time he's ever been to the Midwest. I get the sense that this is sort of a return. I might be wrong on that, but that's what I get deeply from this. And what I get is that he goes and he has what he honestly describes as the foolish images of a return to childhood, or which he describes. He says, "Foolish moments, ecstasy on a breeze." There, and the country receding parallels really nicely with his um, love leaving, like love dispersing like a jug. And it's
but
at that
it's
moment that it pops that he goes, "Wait a minute, this isn't as serious as it is all amount to be." It's not, it's like the end of Flannery O'Connor's "A Good Man Is Hard to Find," where all the violence happens and then someone goes like, "That was fun," and he goes, "It ain't no big thing." And there's sort of a dismissal here that I
and
really love.
well, that's and that the thing is, it just strikes me as it's a lot of puffery that then leads into, oh, and I'm just such a puffery oozing person, and then like it has this stupid, as in, like he just thinks of love. It's like, yeah, that's the way. It's just like it's. But let's move on to a different kind of example. This is in politics, one of them.
Mhm.
It just says like, this Midwest, a dissonance of parts and people, we are a consonance of towns. Like a man grown fat in everything but heart, we overlabor. I hate that. Like a man grown fat in everything but heart. Like that just feels stupid to me, that particular metaphor. I don't even know how that fucking connects. Like how are these other things like grown fat? Like a dissonance of parts and people, we are a consonance of towns. Like what? What are you even saying? Like I mean, I get, okay, the distance of parts and people, like, okay, well, I guess the different parts and people are disconnected from each other. We are continents of towns. Like, okay, like there's some sense in which the LA towns are similar in this way. Like, there's a unity in just this shared culture, which is on the
Yeah, I
individual.
love that line. That
Like
was that was probably
that's okay. Like what he's saying, like that particular part is like okay. I kind of get what you're saying there. It feels a little pretentious to me, but I'll give it to you that there's a point to that. But like a man grown fat in everything but heart, I don't what? Like I don't get how it's grown fat in any way. I don't see, and it's the way it's described with heart. Like it just like this is one of these lines that just like screeches at me his inauthenticity, his insincerity about when you talk about things like love or whatever. It's like it just feels like sentimental garbage when that sort of thing comes along. Um, or just I mean, just another. Let's see, where do I even start? Because these sentences like go through long. Okay, I'll just do the whole thing. I am not here. I've passed out the glass, past second story spaces, flown by branches, brilliant berries to the ground, grass high in seed and leafage every season. It is the same as when I passed above you in my aged ardent body. First off, we don't even know who the you is here in the aged in my aged ardent body, which is like, oh, okay, like I just find that unpleasant. I let me give him that. But going on, it's a short, a kind of love, and I am learning to restore myself, my house, my body, by paying court to gardens, cats, and running water, and with neighbors keeping company. Like, it just feels like sentimentality right there in this really gross way. And I am learning to restore myself, my house, my body by paying court. I'm just paying court. What the fuck is that? Like, it's like, yeah, okay, you're, since paying attention, but it's such a pretentious way of saying that. It's like to gardens, cats, and running water. Okay, I don't see how it even like restores your body, your house. How does that even get that out of that? Do you see what I mean here? Are you getting
no. I just for me it just flows very effortlessly in the
like
language.
what's? Don't you feel there's something just like these words don't mean things?
Oh no, I think they're. I mean, okay, but my problem also is I we don't have the same edition, so I can't.
Yeah, it's actually where actually my house, my cat, my but that's happened like four times. Um, it starts with I must organize myself, and then it goes. It's the end of the second paragraph. Um,
Ah, found it.
yeah, it's so. And I am learning to restore myself, my house, my body. God, I was like, what are you restoring exactly? I don't know. Like, what happened in the past? Are you referring to?
Well, that's partially why I think this is a revisitation of.
Yeah, yeah, I get it, but it's never talked about. It's just like, okay, it's maybe vaguely alluded, but it's not even well defined enough. And again, I'm okay with ambiguity a lot of the time. Like, I'm okay. Like, Beckett is a very ambiguous writer, in a lot of ways, but it just it doesn't feel like an evocative kind of ambiguity. It just feels like I'm just oozing all over. Actually, I want to find that line. Like, where did he talk about his oozing? Like, he talked about it with his cat the first time. In fact, I'm sorry just to savage this like this. Like, I don't.
It's fine. I'll make sure not to send you my fiction.
Um,
Because this is the first one we read that I really resonated with along like the Pinter in this one resonated with me creatively in a deep way. Where it's like, wait, this is really great. But that's okay.
yeah, it's interesting like how this is playing out here because I really I mean, there are moments where it's like okay, I like what you're doing there in a certain way. I like some of the description, but actually, even just like Christ, just like education earlier on, just like in 1833, Colin Goodykuntz, an itinerant preacher with a name from a fairy tale. Okay, I'm not even gonna finish. it's just like the fact it's called Goody Koontz. Like that's a name that offends my taste fundamentally, and the fact that you're then like drawing special attention to it. Yes, because you made it the fuck up, or I don't know. At least you looked around for a name so goofy that it would have sounded like that. It's like maybe it is an actual name. I guess you're looking it up, but
Sure, you know.
it's like I don't. It's like okay, yeah, like you're drawing out the thing that would have been left in precedent, even as it is. Like I think that name's stupid. Like I think you're stupid for using such an obnoxious kind of name. I do think that's just a flat out aesthetic fault. I can't take a writer seriously who uses a name like that. But you can have a different opinion. Do you have a do you have a sense of that or?
I mean, it's just life, you know. This is where it's like really objectively what it's like. Like, so the Mormons, for example, you know, Utah's still often considered like the edge of the borderline between Midwest and West, and it's like there's a lot of characteristics in the Mountain West that are similar to the Midwest, and the funny names. I mean, one of the most common things for a Mormon family to do is to like name their kid like what sounds something normal and then it reads like ridiculous, like Colin Smith, Collynee. And like, I don't know, it's just like that's just like objectively true. I don't know, just like it just is realism, you know, it's just out there and it's real and it's part of the Midwest identity.
If you
And
want,
so
like, if you
it
want to
would be
use,
dishonest not to, in my opinion, you know,
no,
the
like,
sense of place.
there are lots of people who have like a normal kind of name, so it's his choice. It's his choice. And one thing about it, like Goody Koontz, it's like this to me is like Mike Fallopian from Pension.
The
It's just like, oh yeah, okay, we can just name or like I don't know, I forget one that they go hate off Hitler or something, whatever it was. It's like, okay, yeah, you can have a goofy name, but it's at least Pension knows he's being goofy. Here, I get the sense of like, no, he's just he thinks it's like from a fairy tale. Like, no, it's just kind of stupid. Like, I'm okay with that kind of name if it was like, oh, here's like this goofy preacher that we're gonna quote, but he takes him seriously. Of like, yeah, like this preacher knows what's up, guys. He knows about education. And it's like, no, no, I don't find that. He's just spouting generalities, which are I don't know, not objectionable, but whatever. So I just find that to be very, and I see the other thing I just find about the whole thing is there's a degree of condescension. I don't know if that's the right word in it, but there were just a number of things that just made me feel like that's a stupid. Okay, okay, I like things that attack the small town. I enjoy stories that do that. Like Main Street is a great book.
uh,
Um, it really just viciously shows, like, yeah, you see how small-minded small town people are. There's also like positive things he has to say about the small town, but a lot of savagely negative things too. And I'm also more like Sherwood Anderson, who just shows how miserable and isolated it is in so many ways. And I like these writers and what they're doing, but there's something about the way he complains about small town life that just like I don't know, just the way like in one of the politics sections it starts off is sports, politics, and religion are the three passions of the badly educated. They are the Midwest's open source. Ugly to see, a source of constant discontent, they sap the body's strength. Appalling quantities of money, time, and energy are wasted on them. Okay, the first thing I want to say about that is okay, I'm not a sports person, and I see politics as something can be very tedious and pointless. Like I don't want to hear about Hunter Biden or whatever. It just that the idea of talking about that sounds incredibly boring to me. So I think politics is being just sort of toxic and pointless. And religion, yeah, religion's poison, straightforwardly. But there's just something so like the way it attacks it, like, well, sports actually does mean something to people. It is actually a positive thing in most people's lives. Like it's fun. Like don't look down your nose at that. And I just find just the way he's complaining about it here, just it feels like You're not. It's cliche for one thing. Like, yes, this is how I've seen it. That's what people complain about a lot of times. Oh, look at all the money put into sports. Yeah, look how big of a snob I am. So I just find that to be like, okay, of things to complain about, this is not a worthwhile thing. And just like with the preacher instance earlier, it's like, yeah, okay, you're just complaining bitterly and you're not giving me any details with this Goody Kunz. He says, ignorance and her squalid breed, a universal dearth of intellect, total absence from literature is very generally practiced. It's like, okay, this preacher's saying these words. It's just empty abstractions. It doesn't give me concretes. It
Okay,
doesn't
so for the
live.
politics one,
Yeah.
I think I think what I would say is because like I don't think that this is a story about like specifically what other than okay, I think the character, you know, whatever his name was, like that obviously is about that guy. But like in general, when he's talking like this, it's about his own feelings. I don't think it's necessarily always like objectively how it is. For example, the politics section, that was paragraph one. But paragraph two acknowledges to me, and this is where I think he's deeply an aware writer, acknowledges the bigotry and simplicity that he's doing in the first paragraph. All in all, then, Birch is a good name. It stands for the bigot stick, the wild child tamer's cane. And here's the change. Forgetfulness is that their object, and that's a linchpin that functions to put it back on him because how is this whole story is about his past. Forgetfulness is that their object.
No.
Oh, I hold on. Oh, I was new. I thought a fresh start, new climate, new country. There you were, and I was pioneer and had no history. That language hurts me too, meaning the language he had just said about how these people are small-minded and everything, bringing him, you know, it's also he's also hurting his own. He's part of this country, you know. He's kind of realizing that he's insulting himself in a way. That language hurts me too, my dear. You'll never hear it. So I think there's a huge difference between the first and the second paragraphs. And the second paragraph to me is clearly about him feeling bad about the first paragraph.
Okay. First off, the forgetfulness is that their object. I think that's just meaning like the goal is so they don't have to think about things. The goal of sports, politics, and religion is so you don't have to. You can forget about life. That's at least the way I was interpreting that
But
snippet.
look at formally what it is. It's a new paragraph that exists on its own. It's one. It's
Well,
so in the experience of reading it, it clearly is not just referring to one thing. It's clearly bringing
I
him in.
just Well, okay, okay. No, the forgetfulness. No, like that's. I just think that that's a continuation of the first paragraph in essence. There's in the third paragraph. At least that's the way that's printing it for me. Like, oh, I
So
was.
for me,
It was
it's
the third.
printed paragraph, paragraph break, one sentence. Oh my
Okay.
God, I'm sorry.
Yeah. One sentence. No, yeah. That's the way it is for me too. That's the way
The
it's for.
one sentence paragraph and the
Yeah. So
it's just a
forgetfulness is that their
continuation.
object. It's like I'm just interpreting that as no. Like their goal is to forget things. Like that's it's their opiates.
So why if that's the only meaning you're taking, why why have it be its own paragraph?
For emphasis,
I
that's the way
don't
I'd read it.
I think it tracks really well to bring you back to him and his self-reflection because he's using language in very different ways and I think all of it's authentic in the stream of consciousness way. He's accounting for the first paragraph to me. He's almost atoning. I
that
would say
third
he's atoning for the first paragraph and the second
that
paragraph.
third paragraph,
Or sorry, in the third paragraph. Yeah,
yeah,
I think he's atoning for the sins of the first paragraph
I
in the way he feels, you know, in his expressive quality.
I'm just not actually sure what the third paragraph is saying. I don't find. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I don't find your explanation to be. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think it's plausible exactly. I just don't know what's actually being put together there, and I don't. even if there was an explanation, I don't know if it could if there was if it would be actually an objective reading of it. And I just find it just like it's the way it's a fresh start and new cunt, new climate, new. I just find the new cunt like that's just why? Why are we swearing here? What's the point? I don't think that that's actually. It strikes me as a like. I'm very happy with obscenity. I've been swearing for half of the podcast, um, but I just find that to be like it's a way of swearing that makes me feel uncomfortable. I
Part,
don't
I mean,
think it's evocative.
that language hurts me too. I don't know what.
But I don't see the point. Like I don't like it just strikes me as like is he just apologizing for swearing? Like is that what it was? And he's just I mean, is he actually even apologizing? And is it just like, oh yeah, and this is how I just felt when I was younger, and he just putting that in. I'm not even clear if, because he does that. He just sort of changes topics mid paragraph. So why wouldn't he change topics between paragraphs? I don't. It's not clear to me. Again, I'm not saying you're wrong. Like there's a plausibility to what you said, but it's too floating for me to nail it down. Um, yeah,
So my experience of that paragraph. First of all, I think there's a double signification with that language hurts me too. As I said first, I think it refers to.
is it a double signification? Is it just one or the other? Like it's not act. I don't think it's actually necessarily clear here. I don't know if I don't even know if it could be made clearer.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Well, I'm just. I mean, this is just my experience of reading this text.
yeah. Again,
So, to
it's
answer
hard.
your
It's hard
question,
what we're doing here. It's hard what we're doing here. Of like how do we? I have this very different reaction to this text than you, and how do we exactly communicate this deep difference? Because we never had this deep of a difference about a text before. Um,
okay. So, can I just? Here's my
yeah,
experience.
give me something to defend it. Like, and again, like I do
This
think there are
paragraph.
like, oh my, actually, I just have to say, like, there are certain parts where I just got so upset with when I wrote things like, "No, you are a cacophiliac." Like, I just hate this. Oh yeah, oh no, there's a reason I resent that. There's a fucking reason. It's not surprising that novelists of the slums, the cities, and the crowds should find sex as but a scratch to ease a tickle that were most human when we were sitting on the john and the justest image of our life is in full passage through the plumbing. It's like fuck off. Like that's not even what normal naturalist writers like. Yeah, like Zola, like he's very uh dirty and sordid, but and the same thing with lots of other like Joyce and Ulysses. Like Joyce actually even has like defecation in there, but it doesn't feel dirty and filthy in the way like he does. In the way it's like I really feel like he has some kind of special delight in feces. Gas, like it's just the way they says it. Like I, I really there's really not words for me to describe how uncomfortable this man makes me. Just how like I really like the only writer who I can think of who I felt this much unpleasantness from was C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. Because it just felt like I was being propagandized at. It felt like he was lying in certain parts of the book, and he says he was. Um, this is how that feels to me. It's just like, oh, almost love that's oozing out of me. No, no, you're a dirty fuck. That's what you are. You're a plumber. Like I really find it pretentious nonsense on some. Like he's good at writing. It's not all bad. It's not all bad, and I can sort of I can at least have a bit of sympathy for where you're coming from here, Chris. But anyway, I'm sorry for this tirade. Give me your defense that you were about.
Can we go back? Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if that's super interesting to
Yeah.
anyone. Like because like so not it's just interesting. Not one thing you said really bothered me, I guess. And I don't know if I don't know.
Do you feel like there's any kind?
I get so my problem with okay, but let me go back to the politics paragraph because I think like something really interesting is I think it's a very deep an aware text. I think it's one of the few texts we've read where I feel this eye looking back at me as I read with a deep knowledge of my own experience. And it's the first time we read a text where I felt that, where an eye was looking back. Oh, you are going there. Oh, like, so it was following my train of thought at a lot of points. But here's an example. So going back to the politics, paragraph 3. Oh, I was new, I thought, a fresh, blah, 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 blah. New climate and new country. There you were, and I was pioneer and had no history. That language hurts me too, my dear. You'll never hear it. Meaning, okay, so here's my why I thought that was a great paragraph is because, first of all, these are thoughts to himself. So he's not going to go up, obviously, to this woman and say, a fresh start, a new country. And these are just sort of, id thoughts that come and go. Like when just being really honest, like there's been times where you're like, do I really want to break up with this person or do I just want someone new? Just want something else. And I got that really pioneer freshness, like the idea of just like starting over also includes a lot of violence. And I just think that it's one of the few paragraphs where I go, oh, this really is not running a limited liability company. Like this is really the thoughts as they come in a way that I find utterly believable.
I,
And that and part of that is uncomfortability, I think, because that's just how the thoughts come and go. I mean,
well,
I
it's
think and then that's the fact that it also reads so well is part of the magic.
I mean, I don't have I'm happy with stream of consciousness. I think Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man and Ulysses and these are great. But I really just it just there's a sentimentality to it all. Do you get what I mean when I'm talking about there's a sentimentalism about it? There's a certain kind of love and oozing, and I'm being, like, I'm not going to pull myself together, as they say. Like, there's a certain. Do you get that quality at all in here?
I mean,
Like, when he talked about love, does that make you uncomfortable in the sense that that doesn't feel real? That's not how people love. Do you get anything of what I mean here?
what so obviously there's certain moments that are sentimental, but they're always contradicted by moments in the same paragraph. Like I think it's not just like one note. It's in yeah, oh, that's sentimental. Oh, and I'm gonna contradict it by something else here. So I don't feel that I don't have any of those issues because in the context of where he goes with it, it always seems like there's conflict. It seems like a very conflicted text. So the sentimentality doesn't win for me in any way as the essence of the work.
Well, it's not exactly the essence, but actually it's the contradiction that's like part of the issue for me of it's like, oh, I'm being sentimental, and he knows he's faking it in a sense, in a certain level of his, in some corner cave of his subconscious, he knows he's faking it. Um, and so he sort of takes it back, or he hedges it, kind of, as one does when when you know you're faking these things. And when I say sentimentality, I meant that in the sense of like faux love, or faux, like, having, like, showing affection for things not worthy of it, like, going by the dictionary definition. Like, I don't know, and like,
I guess that doesn't bother me because that's just good psychological writing. I mean, I guess I just put that to yeah, he realizes a certain thing and it changes. It's very dynamic, but as a whole, I have to account for where he
well, no, it's the issue isn't he's accounting for it exactly. The issue is that he is lying, as in, and that's part of the lie. Like, I do think, like, he says something insincere, and as insincere people do, they then apologize for it in a certain way. As in, like, when someone says, like, says something mean to you and says, "Oh, I'm just kidding." It's like, no, you weren't. You were actually just being a jerk, and now you're saying I'm kidding just because you're hiding that fact. So, like, that is a way of being insincere. I need more, like that, like the original way of, like, I don't even know where I have that original. Oh Lord, so many pages. That original like candy ungiven after Halloween thing from my house. It's like, yeah, like that. That's a way of being insincere. Um, I see. Was there another good kind of thing that I just overwhelmed? I mean, okay, like here's something that strikes me as more just bad. I mean, I was sort of quoting it partly, but like what Colin Goody Kuntz was saying was about education in Indiana was a universal dearth of intellect, total absence from literature is very generally practiced. There is not a school in grammar, geography, or a teacher capable of instructing to them, to my knowledge, etc., etc. Croaking jealousy, bloated bigotry, coiling suspicion, wormish blindness, crocodile malice. Things have changed since then. Going back to the narrator's voice, things have changed since then, but in none of the respects mentioned. By the way, I just want to say I like that way it says that things have changed since then, but in none of the respects mentioned. Like I find that actually to be clever, sort of sentence. Um, but just that whole way of like, okay, you're just yelling. You're just throwing invective. You're not giving me concrete details. You're not making this real. You're just preaching at me. And you never go on to like exemplify the preaching. And you didn't do anything earlier to exemplify why I should believe this. You're just throwing invective, these empty abstractions at Indiana people, and maybe they deserve it, maybe they don't. I can't tell. You didn't present why I should believe that or not. Do you get why I'm offended by that to a degree?
Yeah, I get it. I guess it just doesn't.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're wrong. Like I feel like maybe I'm missing something here. I just
Well, I mean, doesn't it? I mean, okay, so like this, it still feels really dissonant to me because he's there. Like, well, why'd you come back? It's it just doesn't feel one note
well,
because
it's not
he
one note
invests
because
so much love in the
he
country.
does say like yeah, and he says well one thing he says is yeah it sucks out here, but it's way worse in the city. Like it does basically say I mean a little bit better than that, but and he also says something nice about like oh like the way the trees look or whatever. And like again, he's a competent writer, gas when he's not up his own ass.
I actually would really disagree with. Okay, if you look three paragraphs, I don't know, sections later, or I like to think of them as chapters because they all have names. The same person. This was maybe one of my favorite descriptions of the book. Billy Halskull lives alone. How alone it is impossible to fathom. Like, wow, that's it puts me right into the experience of Billy of
Okay, like
empathy.
it's not I don't like it's a little bit of an empty abstraction to me, but it's like it's okay. Like I'm fine. And then like yeah, I like the description after that about how Billy is like,
Mhm.
garrulously talking to him. And just
But
about
he gives Billy his humanity in a way that he doesn't give the object the people their humanity.
yeah, I think the description is like okay, that's okay. I thought it again. I think Gas is kind of a mixed case in my mind. Of I fundamentally hate him, but I acknowledge he's good. Um, in certain things, and like, but like one thing, even in that like exchange or like afterwards, he said, and this was the sort of experience that pushed me back to poetry. I just found that to be so pretentious, saying it in that way. Like there was just something so self-involved. Just like the little name drops he has of like, oh, these apples are like windowless monads. Oh, great, you read your fucking Leibniz, have you? Oh, great, you're mentioning Plato. Oh, great, you're. It just feels very like when that sort of thing happens, I just roll my eyes. But again, like it's good evidence what you're saying. Like there's something to gas. I don't think.
I would actually okay, by the way, this is the first okay, I didn't want to, but I'm gonna do it. Those were both bad descriptions. The he shouldn't have brought in Leibniz or Plato.
Okay,
I
okay,
would actually I okay, you have won me on those 2 points.
one. Okay, one.
But you've won them for a very specific and I think okay, so there's a type of writing that's kind of like some people call it like MFA style writing, which is very like it's an inside joke description, which is like a man gets their MFA and they're just like they're super smart in their brain, like hashtag I am smart.
Mhm.
And so they often like there's the text with as many archaic references.
Yeah, yeah,
I
Tanner.
have a book that does this. I bought it just out like sometimes I just go and buy a book randomly, and it was called Bonsai, and the novella is basically just descriptions of passages of philosophers and writers he liked, and it's awful because it is that right. It is sort of that like I. It always reminds me of this Kitchen Nightmares episode where a chef who's never been trained at all gives the following speech. I cut my teeth on the coattails of your old school European chefs who took a liking to my vigor. And he just like describes this in like a completely improbable way that uh, is also in some of these books. And so I think on those 2 points, I think the description that a lot of writers I know would say is it's a little MFAE,
Yeah, yeah, I
a little
think.
MFAE, a little like, oh, you're very well read, many leather bound books or something. So on that point, I would actually agree with you completely. And it happened to, I think I would say those 2 points, and there were probably two or three other points. I would even agree with you sometimes on the poetry point, although I think that one's fine. I mean, I read poetry and things have driven me back to poetry, and
It's just
that's how I would say it. So I don't know.
something about the way it's said of like if he just
Yeah,
said something like it drove me back to my own studies or it drove me back to my own world or something like that, but making it so specifically about poetry just it rang the wrong way for me somehow. And by the way, I just want to say also about Gas, like another aspect is he's so like dank and in the dumps. Like his attitude, like it's very. There's something depressing about the way he. I'm not saying I was depressed by it, but like it's not happy, exactly. Um, and it's. But I just don't feel like. For some reason, I just don't feel like it's earned here. Like I read other writers, like Hemingway or Faulkner, and it's like okay, like the kind of depressing atmosphere they're living in of like yeah the South during the I don't know exactly what the years would be when talking about the 20s or 10s or whenever it would have been or like Hemingway okay he's part of the lost generation and Hemingway has a good time he enjoys life in a sense but it means nothing or Eric Muir remarked like yeah okay man brutally traumatized by the First World War that's like these people get away with being depressing in a certain sense. Or at least there's something for them to be legitimately depressed about. Like John O'Hara, he wasn't in any war, but he was in the individual stories. Like they're very savage and painful. Like the things that happen, like the mistakes and catastrophes. I just don't really tonally get it. For wait, did you hear me?
you froze. You froze for about 5 full seconds.
Okay.
So
Like
just like
it doesn't fucking matter. I'm just
yeah,
going
you're saying basically like
basically like I just don't get I don't feel like the content is justifying this. It's like I get a certain sense of isolation, like Sherwood Anderson level, like, okay, like yeah, things are like kind of miserable, but
Winesburg, Ohio, right?
yeah, Winesburg, Ohio, it's like
I
that,
found it to be kind of happy. I don't know
well
if we read the same book. I thought that was like a kind of chipper book at certain points.
yeah, there is well that's the thing is that it's like it's not all depression. It's like there are like a
Yeah.
lot of more positive stuff. There's also a lot of tragedy. Actually I forget whether it was in the collection, but the egg. Was the egg in that one? It
I
doesn't
don't
matter.
remember. That was the one. Remember, I was like really loving it, and then I lost it. I read the first half, and it was great, and it's somewhere. We should do that one at some point as
Yeah,
a
yeah,
con.
because yeah, Anderson is great. I love Anderson.
Okay, so here's my response to that.
And I'm not really taking that too seriously, like that as a criticism. It
Oh
just
no, no, I get it. I think like where I didn't find it depressing at all. I just found it accurate. I mean, I just like have you ever? Have you ever been to like I guess the have you ever spent time in like rural Indiana?
I've only driven through these places,
It's
so
just
I don't.
kind of I mean it just I mean it's I have okay, so being from so the town I was from was not exactly like this. It was a suburb town in Michigan called Okemos, population of 20,000. So it's probably a little bigger than what he's talking about here, but it's still,
Yeah, that sounds bigger. But yeah, go
it's
on.
bigger, but it still is I
Yeah,
just
kind of
I
thing.
just so I my feeling was just like it's not depressing to me the way it is. Like it just feels the tone quality just felt the way it feels to live in these places.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Okay, what I'll say. I guess the thing is there's nothing maybe that wrong with describe. Okay, like I guess a better sort of example is like Andrew Wyeth is, he's describing the same kinds of things as a painter, and it's very miserable, like his paintings in terms of the subject matter. But and I love Andrew Wyeth. He's a fabulous painter. I'd say like it's like him and John Singer Sargent are the greatest painters that America ever produced. Um, but um, so like I can see that. I can see like yeah, like let's make this really miserable in a sense. Like I can go there and maybe and there's positive things in here mixed in. But so I think actually that's not a legitimate criticism I was just having of like, oh Hemingway, he was in the Italian front. He gets justified to be depressed. So I don't like that argument that I gave. I think actually all I'm really picking up on is he just feels inauthentic to me, Gas. I just feel like I'm being lied to persistently. In just some subtle way, it's hard for me to pick up, hard for me to point to specifically. Besides the particular lines that okay, here's like another line just in that line of things is like, at any rate, he can. Okay, he's just talking about someone who's blind, partially blind. At any rate, he can hardly see, and weeds his yard of rubble on his hands and knees. Perhaps he's a surgeon cleansing a wound, or an ardent and tactile lover. I find that very stupid. I don't see how someone weeding their yard in any way or in any context really would make them comparable to a surgeon cleansing a wound or an ardent to tactile lover. Like I find that to be very no, no. I don't see how in any dimension that would either of those things, yet alone both of them, would be appropriate.
I could picture it. I mean, the care in the earth and the gentleness that you have to take with succulents, and that's when I look when Anna gardens, it's kind of like that. It's this deep care and sort of
Yeah, I could see a
and that
gardener maybe like having
uh,
something closer to that quality, but a man who's blind or half blind crawling around and he's in a rubble of a yard. It's like that doesn't. I don't see that, or at least it feels to me like even if it were accurate, it'd be laughable. I could see, your wife, like, oh yeah, yeah, she's got flowers, and maybe she has even little names for the like pet names for them. Like yeah, okay, I can see like that description working, but this half blind person, I just have trouble with that. Maybe
okay.
it's a little unfair, and but again, it's
It just sounds like he's investing the situation with what with the care that the other person is giving, and that's just doesn't seem
I don't. It would be.
dishonest.
It just feels if it were accurate to the situation, it should be laughable.
Why?
That's because he's weeding a lawn that's already a mess. Like, I don't find that to be something serious. I find that to be, it's like, okay, that's not. There's so many other things in this world that you could apply that to. This is not one of them.
Okay.
And I have to say, this is okay. Here's like the most because okay, we haven't like talked about the weird sex stuff really that he brings in, which is just gratuitous. I don't know what the fuck it's doing most of the time. But like, here's like the worst offender.
Oh God, bring it on.
Um, yeah, it's really gross, guys. So if you want to mute, you can do that. Let's see. It's by the way, it's above household apples. The second paragraph above that. Um, yes, you were younger. I was Uncle Haley, the museum man and frequent meteor. Here is my first piece of ass. They weren't so flat in those days and had more round, more juice. And over here is the sperm I've spilled, nicely jarred and clearly labeled. Look at this tape-like length of intestine where I've stored my spew, the endless worm of words I've written, 100 million emissions or more. Oh, I was quite a man right from the start, even when unconscious in my cradle, from crotch to cranium, I was erectile tissue. Though mostly, I'm not even gonna fucking no. That's just offensive to bring in that. I had intercourse by eye. Um, that's just gross and pointless and stupid. Like I just have to like I really just defend this for me.
Well, I mean, I don't. I'm not, I don't need.
It
I don't.
is do you have a defense? Like I'm curious because like I just look at this and I feel like I don't
Well, I
even want
don't
to swear
normally.
anymore. Like I'm just sick of this. Go on. What are your thoughts?
So I normally don't read literature in the sense of going to battle. I'm reading it in the sense of just letting it soak in and seeing the sense of life. And I don't have these strong reactions you have. I just don't. I just don't have a big disgust reaction. I think obvious. I mean, by the way, obviously I'll give it to you. That's gross. But I mean, I'm not gonna like something that's not gross. But like I don't have that sort of like all the ways you're talking about literature. I just don't have those reactions. I don't have these strong like I'm eating rotten food. I just don't have that. I have a much more just seeping in reaction. And like obviously when I love something, I get it. But it didn't strike me as bad writing. It just struck me as odd, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the problem is that it's just okay. Like, Videodrome is a movie. Have you seen Videodrome, like David Cronenberg?
I've seen a lot of Cronenberg, so I know the type of I
Yeah, yeah,
haven't seen that one. I've seen like The Brood,
yeah.
which
Yeah.
was which was great. I love The
Yeah,
Brood.
I haven't seen the other ones, but like Videodrome is a movie that like I don't think it's that great, but it's an effective movie. I approve of it in a broad kind of way. I'm not gonna watch it again, but whatever. And like that's got body horror, some really gross stuff. They get kind of intestinal in there. And I'm on board with that because it has a very clear kind of point of like, oh yeah, we're in this sort of universe of ultra violence and this weird psychology, and like you're a gun like physically grafting itself into your flesh. I'm very much on board with it because I know why it's there. Or David Lynch's Eraserhead. Like it's just like it's so straightforward. Like yes, I am on board with every moment of this filth because I know why the filth is there. It's like it represents very clearly the horror and disgust of child rearing. Um, so I'm happy. I'm happy with that kind of filth. Here, I don't see the point. It's like you're describing words and you're describing like basically the story as jars of semen, intestines of jars of semen. Like I just find that like there's something really wrong with the person who decided to write put those words together. Um, do you
I
get
mean,
my?
I guess yeah. I mean, I guess I just like don't see like a pathology in it. I guess so. At the very end of that section, I think that part of my reading of the section is that you're winding from really high to really low. Plato, and what the most low is, Jars of Seaman seems to be pretty low, um, and Plato seems pretty high, and yet the conflict is very clearly, to me, his own positioning, right? Like, look at it. He goes, poetry, like love, is in and out a physical caress. I can't tolerate any more of my sophistries about spirit, mind, and breath. Body equals being, and if your weight goes down, you are the less. And what I think that isn't just about the stuff nearby. I mean, I think that's also that dichotomy. Like the extreme of the body dichotomy is the semen and jars, and the extreme of the spiritual dichotomy is Plato, Rilke, and all these other high fluid stuff. And so he's trying, at least it feels like to me, to bring in the body as somehow
And
not as much of a lie, not as sophistry.
the
Whereas when he
thing
brings
is,
in Plato, it's a lie.
he says here he's lying, as in you just quoted, is of like I'm tired of my sophistries. Yeah, I can't
Yeah,
fight any more of my sophistries about spirit, mind, and breath. Like, yeah, I'm bullshitting you. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm fucking bullshitting you. Like that's what the above paragraphs were. Like that's when I read that. That's the kind of thing, and of course it is. Like when you say that sort of grossness, it's like of course. And like even just like he finishes it off with like just like this in like insultingly stupid line of body equals being, and if your weight goes down you are the less, as in like a very like physical, the most physicalistic interpretation of being, in a way that's like being, and like, yeah, and when you weigh less your body, you are less. It's like that just strikes me as it's an insult to intellect. I mean, I guess I'll say it's clever in that sense. It's a clever kind of way of satirizing and I'm okay with satirizing the human intellect in a sense. Like I very much like Ionesco's plays where it's satirizing logic so much of the time. I'm okay with it artistically, but here it just feels searingly inauthentic in some sense. At least Ionesco means it when he does it. Like there's something like, oh, I like to play around in this, and then I like to just also mention that I don't take it seriously because I don't take it seriously. Do you get what I'm meaning
I
here?
don't get that at
Okay.
all. Not at all. Not at all. I when he's deluding, he's not deluding you. He's deluding himself, and that's why it's not like that at all. Like it's not like he's a salesman or anything. It's not like it's a process of becoming more aware, and I think that that's just you know his path towards subjectivity. I don't think there's any lie here on the level of literature. I think all the internal deceptions are deceptions at himself.
Like
it's not like they're involving me and it's like, oh no, gas, you
like
ruled
Hux.
a
Okay,
fib
like
or
I could
something.
do
I
like I
just
just
I just don't hear that at all. I think it's a
mention
misreading.
here is like with Huxley. Like Huxley, like in his good novels, is very direct and straightforward with you about how much of a bastard he is, and like he's all the little ways in which he's cheap and sordid. I mean, also the good things that he mentions, but a lot of the sordidness he's very straightforward about. And like, okay, and that makes it enjoyable because he's confessing to you, he's being straightforward in that context. If you were actually talking with him in that context, he'd be sordid to you. But as a narrator, he's good. Here, it's like no, I do feel it's like he's being as in, like just this phrase. I must pull myself together, get a grip, just as they say. But I feel spilled, bewildered, quite mislaid. I mean, just that way of saying I must pull myself together, get a grip, just as they say. I mean, as in pull myself together. That's not even the way I think about these things. Like this is what people tell me, and I guess I kind of should think clearly, but I'm not gonna bother. Um, that's what's unpleasant is that I feel like Huxley he actually is pulling himself together when he's actually writing. I don't feel that Gas is pulling himself together. I don't think he's actually organizing his thoughts in a uh, honest way. when he's putting them out on paper. Um, and again, like one thing that's so difficult about this conversation is that like I give you feelings and abstractions, and then you give me the opposite set, and we're at loggerheads, and I don't know what to do about it.
Well, I actually okay. So here's the fun part. All right, I'm gonna be done with gas. We're gonna put him aside because we're reading Heart of Darkness next, and I feel like it's not gonna be as controversial. It's Heart
Is
of
it
Darkness.
is it funny how I went from Heart of the Country to Heart of Darkness? Um,
Um, I it's weird that I felt like this is like telling the truth. Like you have to tell the whole truth in art. And I was like, this is my example of that in all its uncomfortability. And for me, it read as like some of the more sincere writing. And then for you, it came across as like the bastard and the liar. So we're not going to get at odds with that. However, I would say that I think one funny thing about that is I think that if anyone watches this, they are going to go immediately and buy the book to get their own opinion because
well,
they're like, well, wait a minute, what is going on in this book?
yeah, I guess that's. I warned you. I warned you, listener. But no, I'm kidding. No, like it's something interesting to grapple with. I guess I I mean, one thing I'll say about Gas is I think he's a better writer than Pynchon. I think Pynchon's a fine writer when he wants to be, but I think Gas is has more technical virtuosity.
But then would you say, since you had such a negative reaction, that he's using his technical virtuosity to more effectively hide in a certain sense? Is
Yeah,
that kind of part
yeah,
of your problem?
it's in a certain sense, yeah. Now I do think sometimes it is just kind of bad, like it is just cheap kind of writing occasionally, like that metaphor about the ungiven Halloween candy.
Well, that's going to become a brick joke for our friendship, where every in a year that joke is going to change meanings so many times.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Uh, yeah, probably.
So
But
so then I think that what drew me to it as a final thing of why I love Gas and why I'm going to do all of his other stuff. So first of all, one of his more critically acclaimed. First of all, this is one of the more critically acclaimed writers. So like
yeah,
living writers. I think he's won the Pulitzer, maybe not,
yeah, I think
but he
something.
won the
Whatever.
National Book Award. And for me, I guess I just was like, well, yeah. And I'm assuming you do not have that opinion, but I felt that one of the things that inspired me about this is there is a sense that on a very theoretical level, like in my work, in my dissertation, I made graphs of events happening, and there in the piece I looked at there was isorhythmic flows. It doesn't matter what they are, but they're very cool, where events that might be 4 notes in length are on top of events that might be 5 notes in length, and so they align only at certain moments. Kind of cool. What I get from Gas is in his formal thinking, he's not thinking okay, here's my rising action, here's my denouement, here's my climax over here in a linear sense. What I get is he's thinking formally with repetition in a way that I do in my music. And I will prove it because I have all the data from the chapter titles that it is very thought out, and that also it's the same type of analysis I did in my dissertation. So I'm very excited to get to work figuring out the logic of his formal constructions.
I mean, I'm gonna say like I agree that he's good technically, and I think that there is actually a good structure to this. I just
You just hate him. You just are like, man, this bastard.
look at I mean, just like Google his face. He looks like a pedophile.
No, he's not. He's
He
lovely.
really fucking does. Like I would not trust this man with anything. Like I and he's like, oh yeah, and when I saw it, like, oh yes, that is exactly what I thought you'd look like. Um except more so. Uh I mean like what would I say? Okay. I'm just gonna say like qua literature, did I gain anything about this? Was I actually traumatized in the primary sense, in the sense that we use it here? Um, I'm just gonna say no. Like I don't. Well, I guess I'll say I got I interacted with this person who I felt was deeply insincere but fairly intelligent and sloppy. Like it made me actually appreciate John Janae and Virginia Woolf so much more. Um, I didn't realize how pleasant and sincere they are. So actually, that was something very helpful about Gas for me.
So reading Gas made you like Virginia Woolf more
Yes,
is a pretty
and I
big.
fucking hate Virginia Woolf. I find it so agonizing reading like
I don't like
Detective
the way.
Lighthouse right now, and it's like I don't like Virginia Woolf, but I appreciate her so much more, and I feel like okay, at least you mean it, dear Virginia. At least you're not a fucking sex pervert.
You
Uh,
know, when you say the phrase sex pervert, you sound really old.
yeah, I know. Like that's my whole like. I noticed that I really sound extremely like curmudgeony or
Just about this book, you just sound like a curmudgeon on this on the
yeah,
Gas.
I know. Like, and it's repellent. Like I feel like I sound like death today. So I don't know, man. I mean, I'm glad I interacted with it. I'll say that. I'm glad I think I learned something as about like okay, well, this is a kind of author that exists, and I learned something about myself, I guess, about the kinds of things that I like. And I thought at least the conversation was like, okay, well, here's someone who I respect and I like, and they have this completely opposite reaction to me.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating? So I'm gonna say like I didn't gain from this text primarily, but in a secondary kind of sense, I'll say that. Um, okay.
And for me, I have to give you my game. I uh I felt like this writer is formally me. Not I'm not talking content, I'm talking form. And that was just such a joy to find in a way that I haven't found yet in anyone we read. In content, I resonated with Pinter because Pinter, with with the lying and the truth and the just like a sort of what's that great word, which is like a big storm, hullabaloo. Yeah, it's like with the big hullabaloo of Pinter for in the content of it was great, and how the characters interacted. For Gas, what resonated with me most, and in a very deep way, is the method that he does to construct his books. I found it to be kind of dazzling formally.
Yeah, I mean,
Also, there's so many connections where I just thought he was so aware, like there'd be a sentence, and I'm like, oh my god, that's related to this thing. And so I just want to go make a web. And I think that's the way. Oh, by the way, that's the way I think he's a post like with this type of when we're talking like writing and stuff, like when we read Pynchon, it's like that's postmodernism. Why? Because it passes the smell test. I don't know,
yeah,
but
well, so many
yeah,
obvious ways. It's
so many
like,
obvious ways. Like, but with this, I don't really care about the era. What I liked was that it had this new formal construction, which I think not new, but a very specific formal construction that really resonated with me through the repetition.
well, we'll do some, we'll do Joyce Carol Oates sometime, and I think like that's the kind of you'll like that structure a lot. That she has.
I have always wanted to read Joyce
All
Carol
right,
Oates. So,
all right. Well, anyway, this was agonizing but also fun. So
oh, before we go, next week, everybody, we're gonna do Heart of Darkness, and this is gonna be a weird one for me because I know it's retellings in cinema. So one of my favorite films is Aguirre, The Wrath of God by Werner Herzog. Great film. And also, I watched Apocalypse Now in high school. I hot take, it's an okay film. It's got great moments. And it's going to be great to finally read this source text for me. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it's a good book. It's a good book. I won't say it's yeah. We'll read it. We'll read it. All right. So bye everybody.
Bye, Ray.
Bye Chris.